You are listening to the Tricorder Transmissions
WeeklyTrek,
episode 21.
WeeklyTrek, episode 21 for the week of September the 10th. WeeklyTrek is a Tricorder Transmissions podcast network weekly show covering the news and current events in the Star Trek universe, with rotating hosts from the Tricorder Transmissions network. Each week, our hosts hand-select Trek news from around the internet and present them to you with our analysis. Think of it like the 6 o'clock news. This week, we have some continuations from news from last time and some brand new interesting insights. And with me today, of course, my name is Barry DeFord from PoliTreks, and you guys are getting a PoliTreks heavy weekly trek this week because with me is my often imitated, never replicated co-host, Mr. Shashank of Varu. How you doing, Shashank?
Namaste, Homo sapiens. I'm doing great. I am recovering from a big, busy weekend full of just TV episodes watching and TV episodes watching and sleeping and TV episodes watching. So I'm doing my best to recover from all that busy, heavy social activity.
That sounds like a lot of work. Yeah, I think winter's already on its way where I am, so I don't even want to talk about it. But I have been kept very warm by some pretty great news that the Emmys that John and I spoke about last week went off without a hitch, and we actually had some pretty good stars. Shashank, did you see any footage of it, or did you read about it? How have you engaged with this news?
I am following a bunch of those people who attended from all corners of the Trekverse. There's William Shatner headlined it, of course, with Sonequa Martin Green. They actually walked out on stage together. And most of what I got was from Twitter, where they shared videos. The Emmys Twitter channel shared videos. But the Governor's Award is not really an award that is in contention with anyone else. So every year we know beforehand, as you guys talked about it last time, that Trek was going to receive it. So we managed to see all of Star Trek represented on one stage. And while most of the coverage I got was from Twitter, it was heartening to note that even channels like the Emmys and a bunch of the celebrities like Terry Farrell and Andrew Nimoy, these guys shared some footage also. So I actually got to see some video as well.
They also looked really proud and really happy to be there. And you're right, all of Trek was being represented. And it's really wonderful seeing actors from the original series standing side by side with actors from Voyager, from Deep Space Nine, and from Star Trek Discovery as well. I'm blown away. It was a really great thing to see a picture with Terry Farrell, Sonequa Martin Green, and Jerry Ryan all together. And I commented that there's a lot of talent in that picture. In fact, I'm a little taken aback. There's just maybe too much talent in that picture. I don't know. I'm feeling apprehensive. It was a great picture to see, but just thinking about all the work that those three actors have done for this franchise, and the amount of time and effort, and how great of ambassadors they are, all showing up on one picture was pretty great to see.
While researching for this segment, I actually went back and found out who were some of the other recipients in the past of the Governor's Award from the Emmys. And it's a pretty impressive list. There is A&E Networks, there is American Idol, there is Planet Earth from National Geographic, and ABC, CBS, Fox, and NBC for America Tribute to Heroes, which was a show that they did after 9/11, and Showtime's diversity programming 2001 received it. So what I could glean from the list is that this award is given to something from television that actually transcends television and changes lives, something that goes from regular television entertainment to real life societal change. So when you say that these people look proud, looking at the people who received these awards in the past shows just how much that pride is deserved, and how even all of TV is actually putting their money where their mouth is and giving Star Trek this award and acknowledging that Star Trek went out from TV into the real world and changed lives. And that's really what Star Trek is about.
I couldn't have said it better myself, sir. So moving on to our next news segment, Star Trek IV again is getting a little bit of press where Chris Pine, of course the Chris's, Helmsworth and Pine, have both walked away from negotiations right now. I mean, when we say they have, it's actually really, I mean, it's their agents who are the ones who are advising to walk away or walk towards stuff. But Chris Pine himself has mentioned that he fancies a Star Trek IV as much as the rest of the actors. So I don't know. I think that's pretty much self-explanatory in the sense that I think that as a human being, I think Chris Pine would be up for doing something like that. But of course, you know, it's sort of like watching or wanting to see how sausage is made. You know, it's getting these contracts signed and getting the actors in and ready to go and stuff like that. It's difficult. And, you know, if the actor's heart is there, then let's hope Chris Pine can get that get some kind of agreement going. I mean, I don't want to make any musings on his financial situations or anything like that, but I don't know. Maybe he can do it for a pay cut and do it because he loves the show or loves the franchise. That'd be great. But there's another possibility that's still floating around. What do you have to say about that, Shashank?
So before we talk about that possibility, I was looking at this news over and over in the past few weeks, and one thing is clear: nobody in this particular news feature comes out looking good. This does not look good for Paramount. This does not look good for Chris Pine. This honestly also does not look good for the rest of the cast, because it feels like to the general public they're just sitting waiting around for Star Trek 4 to happen, even though that's not the case. Everybody has their own projects that they're working on. Go and see Searching by John Cho. It's a really good movie that came out recently, and I highly recommend it. But this particular news piece does not look good for anyone, because, again, it's that sausage being made, and nobody wants to see what pieces of the animal go into actually making that sausage, and that the plastic that's being used inside the casing. Nobody wants to see that. And this is just making things worse. I think at this point, it's on Paramount to either just come out and say, hey, we are giving Chris Pine his money, we're going to make the movie happen, or just announce a new movie, or just tell us, you know what, we're done with these movies, we're looking at something else. Because the longer this goes on, the more negative coverage Paramount gets. Paramount just has had so many failures in the last couple of years that they cannot afford this. They cannot afford any more negative press. Chris Pine will be fine. He's doing great. He's making a lot of movies. I'm sure his bank account is healthy. But if they need to come out and say something and make a decision, otherwise this will just keep going on and on. But speaking of the possibility, a lot of people have speculated that it's about time we get a Sulu movie. Sulu has been underutilized as a character. John Cho has led so many wonderful movies. I was just talking about Searching. And I would really like to see my Sulu a Star Trek story. Give Excelsior to Sulu, put him on that ship. Let's see what happens. I highly, highly recommend Paramount at least look into that. And I'm sure people will line up just to see Sulu headline his own ship. And maybe we could get a bit of a Kelvin Prime timeline mixing with Mr. Takei dropping in at some point.
That would be a movie I would see several times. And you know what, as you have probably noticed, Shashank, it takes a lot to get me to go to a movie. But if there was a movie where John Cho plays Hikaru Sulu, Captain Hikaru Sulu of a Kelvin timeline USS Excelsior, just gallivanting around space and being awesome and solving problems and exploring, and then getting a chance to see his prime timeline counterpart in George Takei, yeah, I'd be pretty darn happy to see that movie. And I don't know, I mean, I can't single-handedly fund Paramount, but I feel like that would be a pretty darn good idea on their part.
And they could actually do a lot of cool things on a small budget. Like, I would imagine the highest paid actors on the Kelvin movies are Chris Pine and Zachary Quinto. And if you take those guys out and just give John Cho his ship and give a bunch of new actors a chance, this is a really good opportunity to make a tight, small budget Star Trek movie. And everybody's taking risks. Star Trek Discovery was a big risk, and it paid off. So I think it's about time they stop keeping their head inside this little box and go out and take these radical approaches. But it's just news that, you know, until there is some resolution on it, it'll just be heartbreaking and sad. And speaking of heartbreaking and sad, there is a People article that came out about William Shatner talking about Leonard Nimoy and why their friendship was broken. The article's headline reads, William Shatner doesn't know why Leonard Nimoy stopped talking to him. What could I have done? And it goes into his new memoir that has just been released. It's called Live Long and there are lots of news pieces. I believe you and John covered a big news piece about something he talked about Star Trek V in the memoir, and now he's talking about how his friendship has been broken. What did you think about this article? What did you glean from it? What did you take away?
I guess for me, it's the mind of Leonard Nimoy versus the mind of William Shatner, and the best way I can think about it is if and this might lose some people in my analogy, but I really very much feel like William Shatner is the John Lennon of the Star Trek world, and Leonard Nimoy is the George Harrison. George Harrison was quiet, he was stoic, he was very much the heart of the Beatles. You listen to his music, and there's something a little more heartfelt, there's something a little more touching in what he did. And at the end of the Beatles recording sessions in Abbey Road, there were points where George Harrison wasn't even looking at John Lennon. He was done with him because of John Lennon's ego, because of the way John Lennon was sort of kind of shoehorning his personal agenda into things. And it's not to say that Leonard Nimoy didn't have a personal agenda, nor same thing with George Harrison. I just think that there's a certain level of sensitivity both men shared. It's sad to see that William Shatner is, musing on the death of a friend, and the fact that their friendship, definitely took a pretty hard downturn. But I think to a degree, some of it is a bit of maybe Mr. Shatner's personality. I mean, I'm no psychologist, but I feel like sometimes he could be a hard man to get along with.
In the People article, they actually also reference a 2016 interview with Shatner in The Hollywood Reporter, where he talks about what exactly happened, and he is at this point still not aware of what exactly happened and why they stopped talking. He explains that the only clue he has as to why the friendship may have ended is that at some point Shatner was going to make a movie and Nimoy refused to participate in it. But I would imagine it's deeper than that. We all know that famously Shatner disapproved of Mr. Takei's quote-unquote lifestyle, and he was deliberately ignorant of what was going on in that situation. And just, I'm sure there are a lot of creative differences that everybody on the cast had over the movies, and we all know Star Trek V was a big failure, and I'm sure people had their own disagreements about it. So there must have been not one, but a lot of things, if I was allowed to speculate on it. But the sad part is the article ends with Shatner writing in the memoir, "Until the day I die, I will still wonder what caused that rift." And that breaks my heart, that these people who embodied friendship on our television screens for 52 years cannot never make that up. And it's just, all of it is heartbreaking and sad. And every time I think about it, it makes me feel bad about the whole situation.
Yeah, my heart goes out to Mr. Shatner, and I hope he can find some sense of inner peace from that. But I guess, it's always good to take cues from the emulation of people's actions rather than the people themselves sometimes, right? Kirk and Spock remain untouched. So I think that's really important. And we can still hang on to that. The characterization of who they have, both Man and Vulcan, will always remain dear friends. So that's good. So I guess sort of jumping to a slightly different take on things, if Mr. Tarantino gets a chance to do his Star Trek movie, he is going to include all of the horrors of space. And again, I made a reference to Event Horizon last WeeklyTrek, and I feel again like I can do that. People getting sucked out into airlocks, or maybe taking some cues from the movie Expanse, or I don't really know. I mean, I guess all of this is speculation. The movie is being talked about. That doesn't mean it's going to get made, as John had mentioned last week. So Shashank, what is your take on this? Are you holding your breath for a Quentin Tarantino movie? I mean, we even did a PoliTreks supplemental on this back in the day, like almost a year ago when we found out about this, thinking it was something maybe a little more coming down the pipe. But I think what you'd mentioned about with Paramount, maybe this is why Paramount's kind of also getting kind of bogged down in its own intrigue and gossip, because they can't seem to hold on to anything. Here now they're talking about, what Quentin Tarantino would do with his movie and stuff. But I don't know. It seems like a lot of talk and not a lot of action.
So if people go back and listen to that supplemental, they talk about me pitching a very broad version of a Star Trek movie with the Kelvin crew. But with everything that's going on, I have another idea. Barry, you want to listen to it?
Absolutely.
Okay, here's the short version. Quentin Tarantino wants to make a movie that's all about horror in space, and he wants to capture some of the darker sides of space. We're all itching for a Captain Sulu Excelsior movie. Why doesn't Paramount put the two and two together and give John Cho, who's clearly doing really well in the new movie Searching, which is a very dark movie, and he's shown time and time again that he can do action and darkness just as well as he can do comedy. Why don't they just make this movie? Why don't they just give it to Sulu, let him go off on his adventure? That way you're not breaking the timeline. You don't have to worry about, is it an alternate universe? Is it a new timeline? Just give Sulu the captain's role and give him a crew and make this movie. And I'm sure Quentin Tarantino can make that. Everybody knows he came from indies. His movies have always been indies. He's well known for making movies on a budget. Why don't they just make this happen? Why don't they put two and two together? I know you don't have the answers, Barry, but I'm asking rhetorically, why don't they just put this together? And since this article was brought up by something that Carl Urban said at a convention, bring Carl Urban in. Carl Urban and John Cho, make them be part of a big ship, and let's see what happens there with what horrors in space await us as this new movie heads out.
Yeah, that could be a thing. I guess for me, I'm just not holding my breath. What I am holding my breath for, what I am very excited about, and has actually managed to show us a lot of the horrors in space, is Star Trek Discovery. I think that there's been a tasteful amount of blood and guts, along with a tasteful amount of swearing and profanity, and also a overdose of really great Star Trek tropes and ideas and messages and stuff like that. So I guess I'm gonna finish my last thoughts on a Tarantino or a Star Trek 4, or whether the Chris's are joining, or any of those sorts of things, with, well, Star Trek Discovery in just a couple more months, season 2. Here we go. Let's enjoy that, because we know that's happening. We know that's coming down the pipe, and we know the actors are 200% on board, and I couldn't be happier about that.
It's certainly interesting that you bring Star Trek Discovery up, because we recently found out that they'll actually be bringing back some of the original series elements. And there is a designer article that came out on Trek Movie where the Discovery designers talked about revealing a modern look for the USS Enterprise. They revealed some of their alternate designs for the show, and they talked about how they merged the two and two together with these designs. And the whole development process just keeps getting more and more fascinating. When I talked about this season 2 last with John on WeeklyTrek, one of my favorite takeaways was brutalist architecture, and how the designers referenced brutalist architecture while designing the mirrored universe. And that turned out great. And this just is more fascinating news about what they did with the original series look and what they did with the new show, and how they merged all of it together. What did you think of this article? Did you have any big takeaways from it?
I guess for me, it just boils down to keep it simple, and definitely bringing out old elements and honoring the past. I think is really, really great. What I'm really not hoping for is they have those little tiny printouts and stuff like that happening. But I think using the set lighting that they did back in the day, using some of the more kind of as you'd said, sort of the brutalist or like the modernist architecture and brutalist architecture kind of go hand in hand. If anyone wants an idea of what brutalist architecture looks like, if you look up pictures of the Hawaii airport, is a really, really good understanding of brutalist architecture. But then also modernism was another architectural thing taking place during the 1960s. And this is a really, really deep cut. If you look up the Jasper House apartment building in Edmonton, Alberta, and if you look at those two put together, you can really see where the original Star Trek series gets its influence from. I mean, of course, it was from that time. So if they want to do sort of like a brand new take on it, I think that's a really great idea. I think it's going to bridge a lot of things. I don't think it's going to make the haters any happier, and I think they can just go and be angry on social media for the rest of their lives about everything and keep defining themselves by their own version of fandom. I think for us, the people who are actually really liking Star Trek Discovery, who want to see more of it, and who are excited by their ideas, I think this is great. Like, what a good idea. What a way to bring in some more creativity and maybe just some subtle callbacks.
And this wouldn't be a PoliTreks version of WeeklyTrek if we didn't bring up something political. In the same article, the designers talk about how Harry Mudd's father-in-law ship, the Festoon, was designed to make, quote-unquote, Donald Trump's spaceship over-the-top, big, ridiculous super yacht. So the father-in-law ship was actually designed to be very Trumpian, which I thought was pretty cool. It was we only got to see it in Magic to make the sanest man go mad, but I'm positive Mudd will return at some point. That character was such a hit, they'll have to bring him back. And I'm hoping to see more of the ship. I want the ship to start saying ridiculous things, and I want the captain of the ship to say things like, "This is the best ship in all of the universe. Everybody says so."
It's huge. See, I didn't think I didn't know if we were going to go too deep into the political end of things. So I'd planned to leave that out, but I'm glad you did that. So let's go to another sort of political moment in the world of Star Trek. It looks like Mr. Wil Wheaton has decided to sign off from social media altogether. I don't know. You and I guess we're going to plug our show a little bit here. We just had a amazing episode drop with Mr. Jay Kuo, who is a organizer for Team Decay. He's a social media guru in his own right, and he had a lot of really good insights, and basically said that if we can't get over social media, we're not going to be able to make it into the next phase of technology and stuff like that. So hopefully Mr. Wheaton can find his way back subtly into the world of social media, because I think he's a nice guy.
In his last tweet, Wheaton said, "Twitter is broken. You deserve better than an app that tolerates and welcomes the spreading of abuse and misinformation." So according to him, the last straw was Twitter's refusal to ban Alex Jones, the InfoWars guy. And it's interesting how things have unfolded, because I believe a couple of days ago, Twitter actually banned Alex Jones and InfoWars. They're no longer in Twitter. They have said publicly that given his actions and the way he's conducting himself and the way his news has been coming out and all the misinformation they're spreading, they've decided to ban him. So justice took time, but justice happened. And now that there is actual action taken, I hope Wil Wheaton finds it in himself to come back. One interesting thing to note is this comicbook.com article also talks about how Wheaton has a history of anxiety and depression. So I don't know if that is connected in any way to this. And he has talked about this often. And I certainly would like to think that this is all just because he's against what is going on right now. And hopefully none of that has affected him in any way in that way. But if you're being treated horribly by people every day, I would imagine things like that would connect somewhere, which is, again, a statement and a referendum on social media and how people treat each other there. Yeah. So the whole thing's a big mess.
Yeah. And you know, again, sometimes I get a little bit frustrated with comicbook.com's use of reportage, and I think them making that connection is maybe not fair to Wil Wheaton. He has his reasons, and I won't speculate. But I mean, I have other friends kind of on the political side of my Twitter who, you know, they've just told me that they just simply don't listen, or they don't check their notifications anymore. They just don't even bother, because it can be a very dark and frustrating place. And then, where Jay was saying on our show that sometimes they set up troll roach motels to they set posts up to try to get the trolls to come out of their caves, and then they just
like troll honeypots, catch them.
They just go right down the list and block. Even that's a lot of work. And so my one friend who's has a political podcast, he's saying, he's like, I don't even bother with notifications. It's just not even worth it. So I think that's an all right coping mechanism, which means if you're going to hit him up, you basically want to actually know him, which I think is good too. So I think we're learning a lot, and Will Wheaton's reaction to it is his own. And I'm glad Alex Jones is off Twitter. That's not going to stop him, but it's nice that a guy who I didn't pay any attention to on Twitter is now also not on Twitter.
But speaking of coping mechanisms, there is one really huge coping mechanism coming our way. Hopefully in the next couple of years, it's the new Picard show. And
I'm so excited.
We've got a couple of updates on that. I was fortunate enough to write an article for Women at Warp about what I want the show to be. If people are interested, they can check it out on Women at Warp's blog.
I'm not going to say a ton about your article because I actually want people to read it. But Shashank, your article is one of the reasons why I am now excited about Picard, because physically, because we were sitting next to each other when Sir Patrick Stewart made the announcement, that I wasn't 100% on board. But you have, like the Traveler, you have turned me. So thank you.
Thank you. That is very kind of you to say. Interesting that the whole idea was hatched when you, I, and Jamie were sitting together recording our STLV supplemental, and that turned into an article. So thank you so much, man. Thank you for saying that. I appreciate it. I'm excited for it. And we have a couple of minor updates. Michael Chabon, who is, I believe, going to be one of the showrunners, one of the people in the writer's room, shared on his Instagram a part of a big galactic map that was made by Kirsten Beyer for the show. And it's pretty much just a mapping out of the Trek reality and everything that has transpired in Trek since the end of Voyager and the end of the Nemesis movie, and just that end of where we left off in that universe and what exactly happened, all the events that happened. I'm looking at a 4-quadrant map here that he shared with Dominion and Cardassia and the Borg, and it's just a collection, a rough drawing of all the events that might have transpired, and it's just their way of showing the show is progressing. There's not a whole lot to take away here. If you've watched the end of Voyager, you know where things are, and they're just talking about how everything is transpiring and what is going on in that writer's room. But I'm pretty excited for this even more now, looking at all the details that they're going into. What did you think of this article?
Michael Chabon is a very accomplished novelist, and him coming into this, I think he's really going to utilize his ability to tell a story. And I think when he's working with Sir Patrick Stewart, who again, he has a lot of acting chops and can, seriously, I could see him read the back of a cereal box and it would be interesting. So that is definitely good. But I guess I am actually going to do a quick little shout out of your article, because I think this is what gets me. And I think this is where, if you look at Michael Chabon's writing credits, his books of the past, he's written over 20 books, I would say at the very least. I think his most recent one is maybe it's Moonglow, but he's been writing since the 80s, so he has a lot for him. Moonglow I think is the most recent book of his. But you mentioned this. What happens when someone with such an ironclad conviction breaks? What happens when Picard, the most hopeful of us, succumbs to despair? Realizing he does not recognize Starfleet anymore, he abandons it and disappears from the world, and is forced to confront it when he ends up setting of a forest fire that burns down the universe. So I think in that respect, that's the point. Is we have all sort of seen a moment of hopelessness in the last little while, especially if we ourselves are not. You think about climate change and economic downturns and the fact that no matter who we vote for, it doesn't seem to matter, all this sort of stuff, the rise of the alt-right, all of these terrible things happening, it is hard not to succumb to despair. And I think I get a lot of my inspirations to empathy from how I see Picard, my sort of space dad, reacts to things, and that keeps going. But I would like to see Picard start at a point of despair and, find some kind of way through it. So yeah, this is a really hopeful time. So everyone, I know we're supposed to be talking about Michael Chabon, but also read Shashank's article. It's very good. Women at Warp. You'll find it right away on the blog.
Thank you so much, man. I just had goosebumps listening to you read that out loud. It's certainly a very heartfelt article, and I'm glad you liked it so much. But while I really would like them to take this approach, it's interesting to also note that a lot of the Trek creatives have been endorsing Michael Chabon joining the Star Trek family. From the same website, trekmovie.com, we also have another article in which Rick Berman endorsed Michael Chabon, I believe, on Twitter, it's at Star Trek Las Vegas. And that was where it was announced that he was going to be part of the family. And Rick Berman took to Twitter and he gave Michael Chabon the praise, and he said, "Oh, we are very excited to have him join." And one thing I discovered in this article, which I didn't know, is that Michael Chabon actually won a Pulitzer Prize. So one thing I missed was that Michael Chabon won the Pulitzer Prize. And these awards, like an award like the Pulitzer Prize, is given to people who are well noted for writing something that's not only particularly profound, but also very socially relevant. So if I was to make that connection about someone who enjoys writing in reality, staying in the reality, talking about our reality, and is going to be joining the writer's room to make a show that has compelled Jean-Luc to come back, I would imagine they would at least touch on this topic that we talked about with hopelessness and despair. But yes, I'm very, very enthusiastic now about how everybody's endorsing Michael Chabon coming along, and that's just more good news for the show.
Full agreement. Absolutely. It's looking pretty good. All right, our final piece is again a continuation that has come up a few times on Weekly Trek, and it is a announcement that a red carpet premiere will be taking place at Star Trek Destination Birmingham next month for What We Left Behind, the fan-supported, fan-funded documentary on Deep Space Nine. So I am really upset that there is no way I am able to either afford time-wise or monetarily going to Star Trek Birmingham. So let's hope some of us can, because that would be so cool to see.
What I'm most excited about, apart from the premiere about the DS9 behind-the-scenes situation, is watching the HD footage. We got some of it at STLV. We got to see, I want to say, a good minute of it, which was pretty great. But what I'm also excited is to see, I believe there is going to be an animated or a semi-animated brief summary of what was going to happen in season 8, which is coming straight from the horse's mouth. I believe Ira Stephen Bear and a few other people have put that animated reel together about what they were planning to do in season 8. So that and the HD footage are my most look for these things, and they'll blow your mind parts of this documentary. And the premiere itself sounds great. I'm sure the people who are going will have a blast. There is no way this is going to be bad. I don't think it's going to be bad because, again, it's a labor of love. It was made by the fans, and we'll definitely get a lot of insights about what happened on the show. So it's going to be, it's a really good note to close our weekly trek on, Barry, but it's just another one of those coping mechanism things that gives me more joy from Star Trek, like I needed it.
Well, like we started with the Emmys, there are the people helming this whole documentary, from the writers to the actors of Deep Space Nine. Like, this is 100% a fantastic little project that they have going. And I mean, holding out hope, fingers crossed. And if any folks are managing to get there, I would say, and I'll just muse this is not coming from anywhere in the news, I am musing, not newsing, that I would say that if there is any chance that he ever shows up to any other Star Trek related thing, this would be probably the only time we may ever get a chance to see Avery Brooks associated with anything Trek related. I'm not saying he's definitely coming, and I would say that there's probably like a 21% chance, but I would say this is probably the likelihood. If there's any time, this would be it.
That's just why do you have to just tease us like that and not make it reality, Barry? How dare you?
I wish. I mean, if I knew that, I might pull out some savings. I don't know. That would be an important thing, and probably a last chance of last chances. But Mr. Brooks, I'm almost certain you're not listening to this, but if you are, please consider it. And if any other Star Trek folk are listening and you have Mr. Avery Brooks's phone number, be like, well, they said on WeeklyTrek that this might be good for you to show up. So, hey.
From your mouth to the prophet's ears, man.
Exactly. Well, that is all the Trek news we have to share with you this week. But if you'd like to continue the conversation, you can visit us on Twitter at WeeklyTrek and online at thetricordertransmissions.com. And if you are interested in talking more with Shashank and me, you can always find us on our podcast sites, which is both available on the Tricorder Transmissions, also available on Facebook at PoliTreks and on the Twitter at PoliTreks. And you can find me specifically at BJORNDEFJORD. That's Bjorn DeFjord. And Shashank, where can we find you?
People can find me on Twitter, which is about the only social media anything that I use right now, at gutter_hero, GUTTER_HERO. Let's talk Star Trek. Let's talk comics. I love everything nerdy. Just hit me up and we'll talk.
Fantastic. And if you are interested in leaving us a voicemail, our website now has SpeakPipe. You can leave us a voicemail with your input on that. And if you want to support us on Patreon for as little as $1, you can get access to early broadcasts, special chats, and tons of cool swag sort of things happening as well. So with that, we will be back with more news from around the Trek universe. But until then, live long and prosper.
And onward to Star Cycling.